Hello, good evening. I want to welcome you all to the John Howard Association's 2023 annual meeting. Thrilled to have you all here. And I'm excited to start tonight's event differently than we ever have before. We are thrilled to have you all here, and we're really excited to start our evening off with spoken word artist Johnny Page. Johnny's the executive director of ConTextos. He's a formerly incarcerated professional, speaker, author, anti-violence educator, and advocate. He's a leader on the front lines of creating system change and providing support for people directly impacted by incarceration. And we are honored to host him here this evening and have him perform his original work for us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you, John Howard, for all the amazing work that you do, standing in the gap for so many. I'm a storyteller. I work for a storytelling organization, and so I tell stories. This poet, Saeed Jones, said that a poet's job is to be a witness. And so my job is to be a witness. Officer, what time is it? Nighttime. Can you cut on the light? When I come back, now how did I get here? How did I end up here in the darkest place, in one of the darkest places one can find themselves? A maximum security prison on 24-hour lockdown. A place so dark, you don't even control your own light. Just 365 days prior, I was headed off the prison yard back to the cell house when all hell broke loose. Stop, get down. Boom, came the first shot from the tower. JP, stop, they're gonna kill you. Boom, came the second shot. Lay down, someone else yelled. I don't know where I was running, and I don't know where I was running to. But I knew I had to keep running. Boom, as the third shot rang out, I just stopped and I lay on the ground and allowed myself to be cuffed. For a while, I wondered if the second shot had hit me, how things might have been different. Should I have surrendered? This is the second time that I had, and look how things turned out. I had just turned 18 when I went in for questioning. I was 42 when I walked out. I walked in and didn't walk out for over 2 decades because at 19 I was convicted of first-degree murder, a murder that I didn't commit, and although I wasn't guilty, I wasn't innocent either. What does that mean? It means that I chose a path that would ultimately lead to that tiny dark cell, but I had nothing to do with the act that led me there. Well, at least not to prison. I had everything to do with how I landed in that tiny dark cell. In both instances, I surrendered, and as I lay in that dark cell, I realized that I had been surrendering my entire life, but never again. You see, if a picture speaks 1,000 words, then tell me, why is no one listening? I know you hear me because you see me clearly, so tell me, why aren't you listening? My pain is obvious and my smiles are tears, and I frown to hide my fears. I wear this mask that grins and lies, praying that someone hears. Hears the cries of a tortured soul, the suffering of a fallen angel who had walked the rope between good and evil and now just merely dangles, whose search for purpose almost seems worthless, unable to identify a mission. So I wander blindly with hope behind me, begging for someone to listen as I speak these words when words escape my grasp, a cry for help when I myself can't find the words to ask. In my portrait lies words unheard, symbols of true confession, but no one listens. And until they do, I'll remain in a state of depression. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you, Johnny. That was really powerful. Appreciate you being here this evening and sharing that with us. I'm Jenny Volan-Katz. I'm the Executive Director of the John Howard Association, and I again want to welcome all of you who are here with us and those of you who are joining us virtually, which includes the women at Logan Indicator Correctional Centers and at Fox Valley Adult Transition Center. And I'd like to thank everybody at IDOC who made that possible. So thank you for helping us with that. I'd also like to thank the JHA staff, board members, volunteers, and all of our supporters, partners, and donors. Every one of you plays a vital role in advancing our mission and work. For over 122 years, JHA has been Illinois' only independent prison watchdog group, working to hold government accountable for the health, safety, and well-being of the people in its custody. This year, the JHA staff and board worked together to re-articulate our mission, which is to monitor prisons and advance independent oversight of carceral systems to promote humane treatment and increase transparency. We also created our first vision statement and a set of guiding principles to better explain who we are and what we stand for. Our organizational vision is that for as long as there are prisons, we aspire to have a system that is equitable, reduces harm, and respects people's humanity. Our guiding principles include the following ideals: the need to respect the dignity and rights of every human being, the need to end reliance on the prison system to solve complex social issues that are made worse by incarceration, that mass incarceration is a result of persistent and endemic racism, poverty, and inequity, and that working to improve conditions inside carceral institutions and seeking to end reliance on incarceration are not mutually exclusive. Prison oversight can do many things: increase the transparency of an opaque system, advocate for improved conditions and treatment, change policy and practice, and most importantly, exercise our shared responsibility to recognize the humanity of our fellow citizens who are incarcerated. Our work at John Howard Going Inside Prisons allows us to do all these things, and it provides us with a unique understanding of corrections, and it provides us with a platform from which to push for change. Currently, JHA is focused on the opportunity we think Illinois has to close prisons. We have a report from an independent consultant detailing the billions of dollars needed to address the infrastructure problems plaguing our prisons. We are experiencing a correctional workforce shortage of crisis proportion, and the prison population is lower than it's been in over 10 years. Put simply, our prisons are falling down, they're understaffed, leading to worse and lockdown conditions for all the people that live and work inside of them. However, we also have a 40% reduction in our prison population as compared to where we were a decade ago. Taken together, these challenges paired with the opportunity presented by having a low prison population make closing the most decrepit and unsafe prisons the sensible and smart thing to do. Understanding the realities of our prisons and challenges facing the system is critical to putting forward bold solutions. JHA uses our experience inside prisons to fight for change, to protect the rights and humanity of people in prison, and advocate for a different system of accountability, one that is humane and fair. Our work in this event would not be possible without the generous support of so many of you. In particular, I want to recognize and thank our platinum sponsors this year, who are the Bloom Family Charitable Foundation, Brian Massengill and Mayor Brown, Parole Illinois, and Paul and Sarah Jane Titterton and GATX. I'd also like to thank JHA board member Ronaldo Hudson, who is unfortunately traveling for work this evening, for donating his artwork to benefit the organization. He has generously donated a painting that is up for auction this evening. There is also an exhibit of his original work in the back of the room where the reception took place. And there are also note cards that feature his work that can be purchased. They're available for purchase if you're interested. Now I would like to move on to an important part of the evening, which is an opportunity to recognize all of those who partner in the work, support the work, and make it possible for us to be successful in what we do. As I get started, I'm going to ask our board president, Paul Titterton, to join me up on the podium. Thank you. We're now moving on to the awards portion of our evening. Every year, JHA honors leaders, citizens, advocates, and partners in prison reform for their commitment to a fair, equitable, and humane system in support of JHA's mission. I am pleased to announce this year's award winners. State Senator Karina Villa and State Representative Edgar Gonzalez Jr. sponsored legislation this past session that expanded the jurisdiction of the Office of Independent Juvenile Ombudsman to serve not just the youth held in state custody, but the several hundred held in juvenile county detention facilities on a daily basis in the state of Illinois. This affords the youth in detention greater protections and an avenue for assistance. We appreciate their leadership and the hard work that went into getting this bill passed and signed into law. So our first Legislator of the Year award goes to Senator Villa in recognition of her leadership to increase independent mandated oversight and protect the rights of youth in custody in Illinois. And our second Legislator of the Year award goes to State Representative Edgar Gonzalez Jr., for his leadership on this endeavor as well. Thank you for being here. This year, JHA would like to present our Partnership Award to the Exelon Corporation for their ongoing support and assistance, which helps further JHA's work and mission fighting for a more humane, fair, and transparent prison system. We appreciate their longstanding generosity. Accepting the award on behalf of Exelon is JHA board member Evan Griffith, who we also thank for all he does to support the organization and for building our relationship with Exelon. Thank you. We present the Journalist of the Year Award to Brandis Friedman for her commitment to exposing the realities of Illinois prisons through her reporting. Her work informs and educates people about our prison system, advancing transparency and enhancing the impact of reform efforts. We appreciate her dedication to shining a light into otherwise dark places. Thank you. This year, our Volunteer of the Year award is presented to Shaniva McReynolds. Unfortunately, Shaniva is unable to be with us this evening. We appreciate her involvement with our prison monitoring work and thank her for her commitment to fighting for the humane treatment and rights of people in prison and hope that she is back to health soon. We present the Dedication to Change Award to Ann Adams in recognition of her leadership, counsel, and support of our mission and work during her tenure on JHA's Board of Directors. So I am pleased to present our last award of the evening, our Commitment to Service Award, to Frederick Artwick, in recognition of his longstanding leadership of and dedication to JHA, the humane treatment of people who are incarcerated, and improving the transparency of the Illinois prison system. Rick was on JHA's board of directors for many years, served as board president, and has given so much to the organization through his leadership, legal expertise, and involvement in our work. On a personal level, Rick was the board president when I became the executive director, and I am incredibly grateful for his support, guidance, and friendship. If we could have one more round of applause for our 2023 award winners. Thank you. It's now my pleasure to formally introduce Paul Titterton, our current board president, who was up here helping with the award presentation, who will go ahead and introduce this year's keynote speaker. Paul has been on JHA's board for about 6 years and been very involved in the governance of the organization and supporting JHA in myriad ways prior even to being our board president. In addition to his role leading the JHA board, Paul is the current executive vice president and president of Rail North America at GATX. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Paul.
Thank you, Jenny. Okay, well, I am delighted to be here, my first annual event as board president, and I'm delighted to introduce Lewis Reed. So I'll just tell you a little bit about Lewis, and I had a chance to chat with Lewis actually before we got started here, and we learned we actually are both from the tri-state area, so we're both, we got New York metro area representing here tonight, and I'm really, I couldn't be more pleased to have Lewis speaking. A little background on Lewis. He serves as the Fines and Fees Justice Center's National Advocacy and Campaigns Director. And as one of the leading figures in the field of social impact, Lewis brings years of experience and expertise in government, criminal justice reform, policy advocacy, public health, and personal impact. Having spent nearly 14 years in federal prison and several years on supervision, his leadership led to the passage of more than 30 state and federal level bills, including the historic First Step Act of 2018. Lewis's public policy outcomes have created a pathway to freedom for over 650,000 people affected by the criminal justice system. Lewis is principally responsible for managing the National Advocacy and Campaigns team and working with and/or leading national coalitions that address fines and fees reform and provide assistance to institutions, organizations, and individuals who seek FFJC's expertise on fines and fees reform across the country. Prior to the FFJC, Lewis served as Senior Director of Strategic Partnerships for Reform Alliance and as Director of Memberships and Organizing for Dream Corps Justice. Lewis is an award-winning author, a commentator on the Law and Crime Network, a licensed and board-certified addictions practitioner, and producer of Hulu's Unprisoned series. Most recently, he was named one of LA Weekly's 5 top entrepreneurs to follow. Boy, that's a lot, Lewis. So I'm really excited, and I hope you'll all join me in welcoming Lewis L. Reed to speak today.
Thank you all. I just want to point to personal privilege for a second and recognize Rick one more time. I really do appreciate your passion. I appreciate your leadership. I appreciate your dedication. And you're too young to be retired. So I want you to join me in standing for a round of applause and being able to celebrate Rick one more time and for his leadership. Thank you. 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 More than welcome. Thank you. Thank you, thank you. You know, anytime I'm in a room such as that's as fancy as this, I feel like I know the difference between a salad fork and the other fork that's on the table. It just makes me feel far much more sophisticated than what I am. I appreciate being here this evening. I want to also acknowledge the dignitaries that are in the room, the JHA staff, the executive director, and everyone who diligently and very thoughtfully brought this event together. Let's give them a round of applause as well. They're too modest to brag on themselves, so I'm going to brag on them for them. I want to talk to you this evening about a subject that I entitle Closing Prison Doors, Opening Opportunities. Closing prison doors, opening opportunities. A little bit about me outside of the impressive stuff, especially the LA Weekly top 5 people to follow in 2023. It got me 3 extra followers on Instagram, so I don't know what that, and like 1.5 on Twitter, and I think it was a bot. So that just goes to show how far that goes. But, you know, outside of the things that, you know, seem to be super prestigious, I grew up in Bridgeport, Connecticut. Bridgeport is the Chicago equivalent of Illinois. And when I was 5 years old, both of my parents were incarcerated. My mother served approximately 4.5 years incarceration. My father served approximately 5.5 years incarcerated. I was raised by my maternal grandmother. And before there was this palatable term called the school to prison pipeline, I was introduced to the school to prison pipeline. I grew up in a neighborhood where I saw more people prosecuted and policed and arrested, and I know more friends who've actually matriculated through the School of Hard Knocks. That's a very sophisticated way of saying that they have gone to prison, than who I know actually graduated from high school, let alone have gone into college. I served 14 years in federal prison, 14 years, not for things that I didn't do, like my brother Johnny Page. I actually did those things. And the statute of limitation hasn't ran out in the state of Connecticut, so I won't talk about the things that that I wasn't prosecuted for. However, I'm intimately familiar with our criminal justice system. When I was released from incarceration, I had such a righteous indignation about how the system treated people, black, brown, and poor white people, disproportionately, so much so that it lit a righteous indignation in me, and I wanted to do something about it. But how did we get there? I'm glad that you asked the question because I have an answer. When I think about JHA, I think about an organization that is necessary. I was talking to the board president, and I was saying that I wish that we grow to a point where you work yourself out of a job, where we don't need an organization like this, where we don't need institutions like this, where we live in a country and we live in a time and we live in a society where all people are treated with such dignity, in such respect, and in such a way that is humane that you don't necessarily need a watchdog agency to make sure that people are being treated. You'll notice that in everyone's remarks today, even as I canvassed the room and I had casual conversations with many of you, I never heard anyone who was incarcerated referred to as an inmate. In all actuality, I never heard anyone referred to as a convict or an ex-con or a returning citizen. I heard people, mothers, fathers, brothers. Oh, and let me digress from my subject this evening and break for a commercial announcement. For you who are watching behind prison walls, this message is specifically for you. There is a wealth of genius behind prison walls. You see, oftentimes we think that the package has to be in the way that we think the package has to be. We think that you have to matriculate through schools that are in the upper echelons of society, and you have to have more degrees than a thermometer in order to be able to make it in life. But in all actuality, the people who are in prison, they have been in the basement of hell. They understand what it's like to have the resiliency of a spring and a ballpoint pen. They know what it's like in literally to take nothing and make it into something. And so if I didn't come for anybody else to give a charge to an audience, it was for our viewing audience who is in prison. But for those of you who are in the room, and since we're having this conversation, did you know that there are more than 2 million people behind bars in the United States of America? While you're thinking about that, did you know that the United States leads the world in incarceration? We make up approximately 5% of the world's population, but approximately 27% of the world's incarcerated population. That is a problem. That is a problem. I want to introduce you to someone who is a personal friend of mine. Her name is Pamela. Pamela Wynn, might add. Pamela was a registered nurse who, before entering the prison system, dedicated her life to caring for other people. She had dreams, she had aspirations, but when she went into custody, her world turned into a nightmare. You see, Pamela was just not a so-called inmate. Pamela was a mother-to-be, and she was carrying life within her. Tragically, her pregnancy ended in a miscarriage, and it was a loss that could have been prevented. How so? Pamela was shackled while she was being transported from the county jail to court. She was approximately 6 months pregnant at the time. And while she was trying to get up on the prison transport van, she slipped and fell. And when she slipped and fell, she asked for medical attention, and the correctional staff, ignored her pleas for help. She went to court, got sent back to her cell, and over the next 2 days, she miscarried. In a cell, by herself, in a region where there was no JHA. She had to endure the pain, the trauma of not just incarceration, but a mother who miscarried in a cold, lifeless cell. This organization exists to ensure not just the Pamelas of the world won't have to experience those things, but in the event, if the Pamelas of the world do experience those things, that they're going to make sure institutions are held accountable and they're also held responsible. Because in all actuality, our correctional systems are responsible to the people. Let me say that one more time for the people in the back. Our correctional institutions, irrespective of no matter how much they think that they function in silo, they are responsible to the people. I brought my homeboys from Connecticut out there, so they just did that for the effect of the crowd, I promise you. One of the things that I experienced in having conversation with some of the staff here at JHA is that they believe that the core of every person, including those who are in prison, should be treated with dignity and transparency, especially it being essential in the carceral system. I don't know if whether or not I'm getting a little bit older now, so sometimes I forget things, but I don't know if you talked about the mission of JHA, but I just want to drive that point home. Your mission, which is to monitor prisons and advance independent oversight of carceral systems to promote humane treatment and increase transparency, is integral. It's integral to families that are worried about if whether or not their loved one is being treated humanely. It's integral to public safety When we think about, for the legislators that are in the room, when we reimagine what public safety look like, public safety is not necessarily having more police in the street and militarizing our streets with more uniforms, et cetera. Public safety, in all actuality, is making sure not only the people who are in prison don't have trauma that is going to be exacerbated, but in all actuality, making sure that there's a pipeline into workforce development the moment that those individuals reach our communities. Because in all actuality, 88% of the people who are currently incarcerated will return home. What are they going to return home to? Let's talk about the collateral consequences of one felony conviction. According to the American Bar Association, for every one felony conviction, there are more than 46,000 collateral consequences. You may be saying to yourself, what is a collateral consequence? Let me explain it to you. I can't list all 46,000. We'll be here from now until 4 o'clock in the morning, but I can give you the top 3. Number 1, employment. How are we going to ensure that people who are not only incarcerated, but people who are in our communities, how are we going to make sure, not that they had a second chance, because many of them didn't get a first chance to begin with. How can we ensure that they had a fair chance? That they have a fair chance for vocational licensure? How can we make sure that they have a fair chance for employment? Number 2, housing. Where are they going to stay at? Everywhere I've looked around this country, if you do what we call a biopsychosocial assessment in psychology, if I ask you where you live and you tell me 2 Martin Luther King Boulevard or 12 Malcolm X Drive, I know you live right smack in the middle of the hood. And you probably live with your baby mama. Most of the folks in here don't know what a baby mama is. Get with me afterwards and I will explain it to you. But in any event, it means that you have a housing insecurity. And so what we need to do is make sure that we close the gap in that insecurity. Number 3, how can we make sure that the individuals who are currently incarcerated and when they are released have access to adequate mental health services? Do you realize what vicarious trauma is? Vicarious trauma is not necessarily the trauma that is directly inflicted upon you. It's the things that you see in your community. It's the things that you see in prison. There are things that I see and I've been exposed to in prison that all I got to do is look at Johnny Page right now, and I can just look at him and I can tell him that the moment that you hear a car door slam loud enough, it can cause a trigger. To be incarcerated and have to shower in your underclothes so that you're not sexual assaulted. Those are things that I know people who have been home 5, 10, sometimes 15 years, and to this date, they are still showering in their underclothes because they're still dealing with the vicarious trauma. We need to make sure that people, when they are incarcerated, are coming back better than how they went in before. That's a good place to applause. One of the things that I worked on, Senator, when I got released in the state of Connecticut was vocational licensure. I actually went to go sit for my boards in my state licensure as a LADC in the state of Connecticut. And when I went to go apply, I got an arbitrary denial. Not because I had a crime of moral turpitude that was associated with the licensure, but simply because I had a felony conviction. So I got mad, and I took the state of Connecticut to task. And we changed licensure laws in the state of Connecticut, where they can't make an arbitrary denial of an individual simply because he or she presents with a felony conviction. I also found it ironic. Yeah. You didn't have to applaud there, but yeah. Also found it ironic that the very programs that people incarcerated took in order to be able to reduce their time of incarceration, when they went to go present for a cosmetology license in the community, and when they went to go present for a barber license or carpentry license or some other type of license in the community, they got denied. It was good enough when I was inside in order to get me outside, but now that I'm outside, the thing that worked inside in order to get me out ain't necessarily good. That has to change. It has to change. And so my sub call to action for the legislators who are in the room is think about how we can close that gap here in the state of Illinois. Think about how we can create a springboard to success for people who have been justice impacted rather than perpetuating the trapdoor to failure. Let me say that one more time because I probably said it fast. We need to think about how we can create a springboard to success for people who have been justice impacted rather than perpetuating the trap doors to failure. I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the one of three things that happened with me while I was incarcerated. First and foremost, I am unapologetically a believer. My faith is grounded in God. And if it wasn't for my spirituality, I would not have been able to survive 14 years in federal prison. That was the first transformative moment for me while I was incarcerated. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I won't take up a collection right now, but thank you. The second thing that happened is I had access to education. Education was a passport of the sort that allowed me to turn the institution, at the very least in my mind, into an institution of learning. And so if there is a way that we can creatively think about how to increase programming for people who are incarcerated in order to be able to set them up for success, I am all in. Third, I realized a very simple notion. Those closest to the problem are closest to the solution, but often furthest from resources and power. Those closest to the problem are closest to the solution, but often furthest from resources and power. How can we bridge that gap? How can we bridge that gap? That's a rhetorical question that every person that is in this room has the responsibility, at the very least, for the next 6 minutes or so, to think about, because I know all you got ADD and you're very anxious to check Instagram to see if whether or not I am really LA Weekly's top 5 people to follow. I know you are. But we all have a responsibility to see how can I bridge that gap in my own personal life. I was so pleased to meet a very young lady right before I walked in, and I asked her what it is that you do. And she said, I'm just in high school. And I redirected her to think about her passion, not what it is that you do from a career perspective, but in all actuality, what are you doing in life? What brings you here? How are you in your generation going to reframe and transform the very thing that we're going to be talking about in this room? Last but not least, in the book of John, the Gospel of John, Jesus, I should say, his staff are confronted by some people who have some questions about his background, his pedigree, his intentions and his motives. And they said, hey, we hear that you're hanging out with this guy and, he seems to be suspicious. And they said, we also hear that he is from Nazareth. And the person responded, is there anything good that can come out of Nazareth? The reply was, come and see. You may be asking yourself, is there anything good that can come out of the Illinois State Department of Corrections? My charge for you is, come and see.
So I can't take credit for very much, but I want to tell you all that I invited Lewis Reed and Johnny Page here tonight. Thank you, thank you, thank you. That was awesome and inspiring, and exactly, I think, what we all needed in so many ways. So unfortunately for some of us, there's still some other parts to our program left this evening, so we're going to have to follow that. But I think we're going to make it through, and I think it's going to be worth it. So thank you all for sticking with us. Next up, we have our call to action, and I'd like to introduce JHA board member Amanda Penabad, who is going to present that to us this evening. Amanda started volunteering with JHA in 2014, and she's been on the board for several years now and serves on the executive committee as the board president. I'm sorry, as the board secretary. I'm not trying to rush you into any positions. In addition to her service and support of JHA, Amanda's day-to-day work is near and dear to both our work at JHA as well as to me personally. She's a staff attorney with the Federal Defender Program here in the Northern District of Illinois, defending the rights of those in need and fighting for the fair and humane treatment of everyone touched by the criminal legal system. Please welcome Amanda to the podium.
Thank you, Jenny, and good evening, everybody. I am so excited to be here. I am excited to be here to listen to Lewis Reed and hear a little bit about your story and your advocacy, to hear about how you turned that righteous indignation into action. I am glad to be here to hear Mr. Page give that wonderful performance. And I'm excited to be here to be in a room of people who understand the worth of and want to support the John Howard Association. Like Jenny said, I've been involved in John Howard for about a decade now, and joining John Howard was a no-brainer for me. Like Jenny said, for my day job, I work as a federal public defender, so I am in and out of prisons and jails weekly. And every time that I walk into one of these facilities, I can't help but think that if more people had access to these spaces, if more people understood the reality of what these places are like, there's no doubt that we would overhaul our system. I joined JHA because I know how important it is to go directly into these facilities, to talk with people who are living this as their daily life, to shine a light on a place that is usually kept in the dark. I'm so grateful that John Howard brings transparency and accountability to a space that's just so inaccessible. That monitoring work is an incredibly important part of what John Howard does. It's probably what we're best known for, and it's a unique thing. We're one of the only independent watchdogs in the country, but that's not the only thing that John Howard does. I come back to this organization every year because I am consistently impressed with the way that the staff thinks so carefully and thoughtfully about what we can do to meaningfully and measurably improve people's lives, both when they're in custody and when they return to our communities. It's important to me because in my job, I can go into court and make a client's legal case. But what's really unfortunate, what's really troubling, is that there's not a lot that I can do on a daily basis to make my clients' lives better while they're in custody. And it's a terrible feeling, because in my job, you get to know your clients, you get to know their families, their kids' names, their mom's cell phone number. And to not be able to do anything on a daily basis is a really terrible feeling. You become, if not, at the very least, a teammate, a friend. And so that's where John Howard comes in and fills the gap. I think about the kind of work we do, and I'll give you an example of the medical copay. In IDOC, people in custody were paying $5 every time that they had to go see a doctor. And I get how that sounds to us in the room, $5. But when you're making 30 cents an hour in an institution, that can be the difference between being able to access additional commissary food so that you are fed and full at the end of the day. It can be the difference between having access to clothes so that you're clean and warm. And to put that into context, if you're a lawyer in this room billing out at $800 an hour, That's a $13,000 copay. So JHA led the charge on getting rid of this copay because the health of the people in custody is too important to tax that way. And that thing's a piece of the past. We were successful. That copay's gone. So that's just one example of the ways that John Howard identifies a real, actual, actionable problem for incarcerated folks and figures out how to go about fixing it. There are a ton more examples, and I would happily share them with you all, but I am time limited. So I'm going to say go to our website. Go to our website and read all about them, because we're doing all sorts of great work. The short of it is that I've become a part of this organization because I know that the things that we do move the needle. We make a measurable difference in people's lives. We bring humanity and grace to a system and a group of people who are too easily ignored by our society. So tonight, I am standing up here to ask you a question, and I think you know what it is. Will you help fund our work? Will you help us make that difference? And I know, and I promise you, we give an excellent return on investment. So for those of you here in the room, you can take your phones out. You're going to unlock them with a code, not with Face ID, Fourth Amendment forever. You can scan the QR code on the back of your program, and a link will pop up, and you can donate to John Howard. And you can do that before you even leave your seat. I would love for you to do that before you leave your seat. And if you have no idea what a QR code is, find a millennial, a Gen Zer in the room, ask for help. Find me, find Rebecca in the back, our director of development. We would love to help you figure out the QR code. And if you're at home, there's the camera. There's a little button that says donate under the screen featuring my smiling face. You can click that. You can navigate away from me and contribute your donation tonight. We can't do this work without you. It is critical work. It is important, meaningful work. Please help us do this work. So I'm going to go ahead and in advance thank you for helping us make a difference. And I am going to turn the mic back over to our fearless leader, Jenny.
Thank you. I know I was moved to give a huge sum of money just then, and I'm hoping some of you were too. No? Okay. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you to everybody in this room tonight. Thank you to our amazing speakers. You brought such passion, so much information, so much heart to this room tonight to help people better understand the work we do, the mission we have, and why we do it. And you did that by sharing of yourselves and your experiences, which is the best way for people to learn and understand. So thank you for that. When I look around this room tonight, what I see are a lot of people that make it possible for John Howard to do their work. I see other advocates, I see partners, I see legislators, I see policy people, I see people with lived experience, I see the leadership team of the Illinois Department of Corrections who allows us to come into their facilities and do this work and create transparency. I see a leader of a detention center who calls us in and asks us to point out things he could do better, do differently. So, yeah. And it's important to remember that we make the most change when we work on it together. So let's keep doing that. This concludes our 2023 annual event. I want to thank you all again for being here. I want to thank everybody who is watching. We so appreciate you participating. I want to thank our amazing speakers. And let's not stop. There's a lot more work to be done, and together we can get it done. Thank you. And the last thing I'll mention, and this will really bring applause, the bar is still open.